Going on, my friends? This is Rick, and you're seated at the table, and we're looking at Anton's rebellion, Anton Marik's rebellion. And so we'll just open excuse me, start with the opening reading out of the entry from the Bush Wars, which is where I'm getting my material from. Although the story is pretty well known, it's in several of the House Marik source books as history. So, all too often, the first casualty of war is the truth, even more so in civil war. When friend pitted against friend and brother against brother, it is no surprise that when it comes to time to pen the histories, the victors inevitably seek to publicize justifications for their actions and to paint the loser in the worst possible light. Anton Revolt is almost too pure an example of this tendency. The single event, a seemingly small war, had an impact on the inner sphere well out of proportion to the size of the conflict. The repercussions of the revolt reached far beyond the borders of Free Worlds League. It is arguably the pivotal event in the first half of the 31st century, for it indirectly lays the foundation for the events that would trigger the Fourth Succession War. From a vantage point almost half a century distant, it now becomes possible to untangle decades of distortion and to resurrect the truth. The official records previously sealed are now becoming available. Other sources of information, including ComStar, The Word of Blake, and Welsh Dragoons, have also been more forthcoming in recent years. Armed with new data, it is now possible for the historians to storm the fortress of ignorance and battle the dragons of misfortune that dwell within. Signed, Professor Aaron T. Fustelberg, University of Atreus, 12 November 3060. So we talk about the seeds of rebellion, the introduction, and I'm not going to go right down through the history of leading up to it. Unlikely bedfellows, then we get into the various personalities, Janos Marik and Anton Marik, as well as Maximilian Liao and Jamie Wolfe, Joshua Wolfe. Entry here. I talk about other stuff in there. And we talk about opening moves. Captain-General Janos Marik's military and domestic policies continue to widen the rift between him and his brother, courted by factions within the League's government and military, as well as the devious Chancellor Maximum Liao. Duke Anton became convinced that the Free Worlds League needed new leadership, commanding the Capellan Front and acting as administrator for the Protectorate of Worlds. Anton established his headquarters on New Delos. Retreating into seclusion in 3012, Janos left Parliament to become embroiled in petty bickering and gave Anton his chance to set long-laid plans in motion. The demand for troops on the Lyran front allowed Anton to rid himself of some of the commands he could not sway to his cause. Others were isolated through the simple expedient of reassigning their transport, assets Anton's forces seized in their opening moves. In addition to his ducal guard, 4 combined arms regiments assembled in secret, Anton could rely on the 3rd and 18th Marik militia. The Duke had once commanded the 3rd, and the 18th had served under him for over 10 years. The 4th and 5th Regulan Hussars also pledged support, as did the commander of the 12th Atrian Dragoons, in demonstration of how isolated the Captain General was becoming. Gerald Marik, Janos' second son, allied himself with Anton. True to his word, Maximilian Liao gave Anton control of Welsh Dragoons. In late February, the Dragoons packed up their equipment and dependence on Wright, heading up the frontier. They jumped the border at Harsfield. Anton's men controlled the world using the pretext of rooting out Mascara cells to control access to off-world communications. As the Dragoons passed through, no one of them leaked to tip off Janos. While the Dragoon flotilla was jumping into New Delos, Nadar Jump Point, their new employer was publicly declaring himself Captain General. On 22nd May 3014, Anton's revolt began. So we talk about the section on the rebellion itself, some maps for locations and things like this, various worlds that were fought and contested, provincial loyalties opening during the Anton's revolt. So we look down through the various locations within the Free Worlds League, the states of the Free Worlds League, and which side of the fence or they sat on, or if they were just sitting on the fence. And the various battlefields, Matherin's, Sophie's World, other actions, faltering steps. By mid-September, Anton's troops had achieved some notable successes, but also some worrying failures. Gaining control of battle mech plants in Iran and Emrys IV, the military manufacturing industries of Bernardo and Ancillon represented a major victory for rebels, but the need to launch Sophie's world assault had been forced Duke Anton to deploy his reserves far sooner than originally planned. The reversal of fortunes on Matron was also a matter of grave concern, threatening Anton's southern flank. The Captain General's efforts to concentrate his forces being frustrated by renewed action on the Lyran frontier, Janos feared these probing attacks were testing water for a larger offensive. Forced to maintain a strong presence to fend off House Steiner, Janos had few dependable commands to commit to the battle of his brother's forces. Those troops the Captain General did possess were instantly handicapped with the prospect of facing the apparently invincible Wolf's Dragoons, a prospect that gnawed at the morale of even the best formations. On the political front, both brothers continued to make diplomatic overtures to the neutral provinces, especially facilitating Principality Regulus and the Relcrian Andrian. Like his brother before him, Anton soon discovered that Kathleen Humphrey's vocabulary consisted of only one word: no. In Parliament, things were going a little better for Janos as he lobbied for relaxation on the restrictions of the Intelligence Act, allowing safe and much more freedom to root out treason. He got the amendment, but in return he had to agree to a parliamentary review of all safe operations upon their completion. We talk about Sophie's World again, Matron, various worlds of the issues, other actions, collapse. Anton achieved several significant military victories, primarily thanks to Rolf's Dragoon's success, but Janos was stealing the lead in the political arena. Principality Regulus had finally been pressured into declaring for the Captain General, even the stubborn Catherine Humphreys had consented to release one of her regiments for service with the Loyalists, invoking the Home Defense Act to hold the other defenders of Andrian within her duchy, to guard against the Capellan threat. Quote. Rumors that Anton was receiving support from Chancellor Liao were becoming widespread. Catherine Humphreys was quoted as saying that she found Janos preferable to a Liao puppet like Anton. Anton's failure to sway Andrian was to his cause now left the Duchy of Orient free to threaten his already vulnerable southern flank. Thinking to administer Orient a knockout blow, Anton drafted plans for a fourth thrust, codenamed Condor, and operation proved an expensive failure. Callaway 6 cost the rebels irreplaceable troops and equipment. Worse, it proved that the Dread Wolf's Dragoons were not invincible. We talk about battles at Callaway 6 and Venera, Tiber, and other actions, and the final mistake. The situation now looked hopeless for Anton. The Loyalists were squeezing his forces into ever smaller pocket as his support was melting away by the hour. Presented with evidence that Dragoons were planning to abandon him, Anton sought to test Wolf's loyalty. Summoning the colonel to his headquarters, Duke Anton ordered the Wolf to disperse his mercenaries to bolster his ducal guards. Wolf refused, citing a clause in the Dragoons' contract that Dragoon forces would not be placed directly under command of Anton's officers. Mercy then went on to propose an alternate strategy of using the Dragoons to strike beyond the Loyalist front at their supply lines and slow their advance. Seeming to back down, Duke Anton allowed the Dragoons to depart with their dependents from McKenna, only requesting that Wolf have members of his staff remain to brief him on proposed operation and continue to act as a liaison. Now certain that Wolf intended to abandon him, Anton had the liaison staff, headed by Joshua Wolf, arrested. Anton then sent a message to Wolf at McKenna's Nadar jump point, demanding that the Dragoons be redeployed as he had ordered originally. Liaison staff and their dependents would be hostage to the Dragoons' obedience. In response, Jamie Wolf sent Epsilon Regiment, the support battalion, Special Recon Group, on to second chance with the Dragoons' dependents. The rest of the Dragoons would follow Wolf back to New Delos. Exactly what happened next is subject to conjecture. Unsubstantiated accounts suggest that Joshua Wolf attempted to kill Duke Anton, or perhaps just escape after being brought to the Duke's office for a personal interview. After seizing a gun from one of the guards, Joshua was shot by Vassar Christoph, who, whatever actually happened, Joshua Wolf was dead, and Anton Marik panicked. He had the hostages executed on the charge of treason. Unknown to the Duke, Jamie's wife Ellen and his daughters Bridget and Lynn were among the slain. Incensed beyond reason, the Dragoons descended on New Delos in a murderous fury. The aftermath. In the Civil War, neither side can either claim to be the victor or only the survivor. Free Worlds League survived Anton's revolt, but it cost was heavy. The new Delos treason trial started in mid-April of 3015 and lasted for 6 months. The surviving rebels received little mercy, and many of Anton's senior officers and supporters were executed. Among them was Governor Constantine Novaroma. Other rebels were exiled to prison camps or condemned to hard labor. Militarily, the FWLM was a shambles. Defections and combat losses had depleted federal forces, while the mauling of loyal provincial forces left the Captain General with no reserves. Other damage weakened by the Anton revolt was less obvious. There remained an atmosphere of suspicion between those commands that had demonstrated their loyalty by fighting for Janos and those that had not, either because they remained defending the Lyran front or belonged to neutral provinces. The resulting lack of cohesion would cost the FWLM dearly in decades to come. In a surprise move, Janos bolstered his weakened forces by offering a contract to Wolf Dragoons. The Captain General showed no animosity towards the mercenaries over Anton's death. Indeed, he expressed his own regret for the death of Joshua in a personal note to Jamie. The move sparked a political firestorm in Parliament, where renewed rumblings from across the Lyran border served as a rude reminder of the League's desperate need for troops. The furor died down, and Janos unleashed the dragoons on House Steiner in a succession of raids that accumulated in the 13th battle for Hesperus. Politically, the Civil War was much of the unity of Janos Marik had succeeded in creating upon his ascension to the Captain-Generalcy. Gone was the optimism of the final years of the 30th century, replaced by the divided parliament and a resurgence of an incessant bickering between the provinces. The populace had previously held the Captain General in high regard, but the harsh measures instigated against those who remained neutral now left Janos' reputation tarnished. From an economic perspective, the damage was even worse. The Eagle previously enjoyed a strong exchange rate with ComStar's Seabell had taken a beating. Thankfully, the League's manufacturing base remained mostly undamaged, but the Civil War had disrupted interstellar commerce. Factories sat idle, waiting for shipments of vital components. Mountains of finished goods were sat in warehouses, waiting to be shipped to markets starved of anything to sell. The eternally scheming Maximilian Liao and the Capellan Confederation came out as the clear winners. The Free Worlds League was in turmoil and would be in no position to threaten House Liao for years to come. Exactly. Then we talk about deployment tables, Anton's revolt, locations of troops and where they were, both loyalist and federal troops, and various settings. So we get the Andrian War. So let's see. Where are we at? All right. So we talk about this sort of book is an excellent source material for a number of reasons. And I recently heard one of you guys had made some comments that you heard that Catalyst is actually looking to revive some of these older Bush War books and produce some new ones, which would be excellent. That'd be great. I'd love to see them come down the road. I mean, you know, it is the way it works. So let's look at some of the major events or long-term effects that came out of Anton's rebellion and how truly it did affect the inner sphere for many years to come, and affected not only across the board in unforeseen ways, but also how it lessened their Free Worlds League ability to be an effective member of the Capellan agreement that they signed as to join the Confederation and the Combine as a foil against the building powerhouse of the Federated Commonwealth. So, while the Free Worlds League is well known for its internal divisions and near constant infighting, Anton Marik's rebellion serves as a showcase for the many problems besetting whomever is sitting as Captain General, and the great house as it is seen by its peers. A near constant dissent among the various lesser house nobles making up the Free Worlds League, as well as its myriad collection of government types which run across the spectrum of human civilization, almost always guarantees that the Free World League is never at its full potential. So much when we talk about civil wars and infighting, and when in the BattleTech universe, the first thing that comes to most people's mind is the Free Worlds League. This is like a very massive dysfunctional family who's constantly bickering and fighting, and actually coming to physical blows in some cases amongst themselves. The only time that they ever seem to get their act together or to unite as a combined front is in the face of an overt threat from the outside, mainly if the Confederation or the Commonwealth decides to get froggy and jump the fence. At that point, the Leaguers get together and shove them back over the fence. Usually, it's not always that way, but generally, usually, that's how that kind of plays out. A system that allows Parliament to block and sometimes supersede the Captain General's rule. Parliament serves as a proxy for the nobility, give them the power to deny crucial funding and military support, in large part due to the Home Defense Act. The HDA permits the various smaller houses to withhold as much as 75% of their military forces from federal deployment and use. This has stymied more Captain Generals through the history of the Free Worlds League than just about any other thing coming out of their hot mess of a government system. The fact that the Captain General, who's supposed to be a military dictator by fiat, it's his job to protect the Free Worlds League as a whole, to project its interests and its power beyond its borders. To do this, he needs access to resources and troops. But if you have all your petty little states withholding those units, withholding that support, that material support, and that logistics chain at crucial moments, it really, really does play an impact on just how effective the Free Worlds League can be on the galactic stage. Of course, down the road, Thomas Marik, or the fake Thomas Marik, depending on your stance on that, manages to actually pass a resolution that that does away with the Home Defense Act and does a lot to consolidate power within the Free Worlds League in the hands of whoever's sitting as Captain General. It also contributes to Janos' decision to designate his youngest son, Thomas Marik, who joined ComStar as its successor. Growing up, the two brothers were very close, and Anton's betrayal hits Janos pretty hard. It also increases his paranoia level in more than one way when we're dealing with, trying to accumulate and figure out what's going on in the politics and stuff like that. This makes Janos designate the only son he has who's not actually present and in the middle of or being affected directly by the various factions, rulers, nobility, etc. within the Free Worlds League. And it has its own implications later down the road, including eventually causing him his own death. So when we look at, not a coup de grace for Janos Marik's rule, Anton Marik's rebellion does have a major impact in the rest of his reign. Anton's act of rebellion hits Janos harder than as he was close to and deeply trusted his younger brother. The act joins the many emotional losses that Janos has already suffered over the years. The death of not one but two wives and two daughters has greatly impacted Janos' life. That Anton would choose to implement his rebellion while Janos was grieving for the most recent losses only sharpened that act of betrayal. Indirectly, Anton's rebellion also sets the stage for more descent and another attempted coup by Janos' nephew Duncan Marik some decades later. This is also part and par can be traced back to some of the elements that got put into motion during Anton's rebellion. Indirectly, Anton's rebellion sets the stage. Yeah, we got that part. The rebellion serves to further erode Janos' power base and perhaps more importantly, lessens his formerly aggressive leadership. So when forced to join the Capellan Accords, the Free Worlds League is not in a position of strength to do much when the newly minted Federated Commonwealth launches its assaults on the Confederation and Combine. As the third partner of the Accord, they were expected, both the Confederation and the Combine expected the League to do a lot more than it was able or was willing to do or able to do. It's some time after the actual initial invasion takes place that Janos is finally prodded into motion to act on some aspect. In most part, all he does is a brief raiding campaign against some Commonwealth border worlds, but that's also more likely in response to the handful of probing attacks and pressure operations that the Federated Commonwealth, via the Commonwealth border with the Free Worlds League, had put into place to help keep him and his troops kind of bogged down. It just is what it is. It does play a major role in why the Free Worlds League did not play a significant role in the Fourth Succession War, and how come they were they performed fairly poorly. And for one reason, the Free World League military has not fully recovered from the bitter infighting between Loyalists and rebel troops. The added upswing in Milo operations within the Free World League is also designed to further spread dissent and agitation, so simply it just couldn't do much for its supposed allies. At the end of the day, the Free World League was still reeling from the after effect and the long-term issues that came out of Anton's rebellion, and that's just the cold, true fact about it. But there are also some positives along with the negatives that come into this stuff a little bit. And ironically, the Anton's rebellion also cements the Wolf Dragoons' reputation for fighting to the knife for their dependents and being a crack mercenary command. It also starts to asking some elements within the Inner Sphere begin to asking more questions, more pertinent, detailed questions about the origins of the mercenaries and just how is it that they are so effective and so well equipped, and what is really going on beneath the scenes. So when we look at the current Wolf's Dragoons, that further enforces them as a premier mercenary force in the Inner Sphere, is equal to the best house units available. And that's the hard truth. You find the best elite units from any of the houses, and the Wolf Dragoons are equal to or better than. Straight up. The best mercenary commands anywhere in the Inner Sphere. By far, the Wolf Dragoons are still equal to or better than all comers. They are a force multiplier and a force to be reckoned with. And the very fact that their reputation is so solid and so aggressive also works in their favor too, because that in and of itself is a force multiplier. Just their reputation alone is worth another regiment of troops, if you want to make that analogy or take that look at it. We also see coming out of Anton's rebellion, because of the tragic loss of Joshua Wolf, the birth of the Black Widow legend. The death of Joshua Wolf at Anton's order did much to create Natasha Krinsky's reputation as one to never cross. It also affects her personally far more than she would ever admit to. When considering a clan true-born origin, this makes this loss in eternal rage all that more important. The fact that she actually develops a relationship with Joshua that's fairly deep is something that's both terrifying and new to a clan trueborn. It's something that's anathema. It goes completely against the tenets of their moral social structure that beat into them from as soon as they're old enough to stop squalling and screaming after they get out of the canister. So the fact that she had reached this point of personal development, to have it destroyed in such a horrific manner at the hands of somebody like Anton, and anybody, just further cements her reputation as being a vicious and obsessive mech warrior and commander. Straight up. You have to figure that played a huge role. What we see entries in that Anton Marik, she was going to see him dead at her feet at all costs. She leads her command through hell, literally. An entire force is set on fire in order to help block one side of Anton's fortress from being attacked by Wolf's Dragoons, and that's the avenue that Natasha brings her Black Widow company through, and then breaches the walls to his fortification, and then storms his facilities, and allows the breach that opens the doors for the rest of the Dragoons to pour in and put an end to Anton and his rebellion. Straight up. Anton's action demands that Jamie Wolf turn over control of the Dragoons to his officers, and the resulting outcome that follows should have been a beacon of what not to do when dealing with Dragoons. Lessons apparently not heeded or even acknowledged within the Combine years later, where events during the Fourth Succession War pit the Dragoons against House Kurita. If you're a student of history or a scholar of the Wolf's Dragoons, and you look at how they reacted to the death of Joshua and Jamie's wife and children and those other 18 dependents by Anton Marik's actions. That aggressive, all or nothing, I'm coming to kill you mindset. And they not only do it, they do it. They don't talk about it, they come knocking. And then they knock the door down. And then they knock Anton down and his people down. Crush them. This is evidence of just how far the Dragoons are willing to go to defend their own and to protect their own version of honor. It's staggering that how one can make the argument that perhaps Takashi Kurita didn't understand that, or he had not heard about Anton's rebellion and the Dragoons' reaction to his betrayal. I find that highly unlikely. Takashi was not an ignorant person by any means. He had made plenty of efforts to make sure that he was kept abreast of the major things going on in the Universe. You damn well know he had advisors who did. The very fact that the way the battle between the House Kurita specifically and the Wolf Dragoons plays out in the second half of the first half of the Fourth Succession War is pertinent because in a lot of ways, Jamie Wolf's actions and the fight to the knife that takes place between the Kurita troops and Wolf's Dragoons is testament to just how elite this group is. How special this group is at that time. That they literally cripple the Draconis Combine's military apparatus on the Federated Sun's front during a crucial point. In truth, one of the things that allowed the Federated Commonwealth acts of aggressions for the Fourth Succession War to be so successful is because Hans Davion took a gamble. He stripped a lot of his vital frontline troops away from the Combine border in secret, as much as possible, and redeployed them to the Capellan Confederation front in order to use them to crush the Confederation. This left the Federated Commonwealth's border with the Combine extremely vulnerable. Had the Combine been able to focus and create a forward thrust in the traditional Kurita fashion, we very well might have seen at least a threat to New Avalon, if not the actual conquering of New Avalon, many decades before it takes place. And that's the true fact. But a big part of the reason this doesn't happen and their slow response to do anything aggressive against the Federated Sun's version of or front of the FedCom coalition or alliance was because of the action of the Wolf's Dragoons fight to defend their defendants, and more importantly to level justice of their own on to the Kurita forces for their temerity to attack them in the first place. The dishonor that was showed to them. So Anton's rebellion really does, if we go down that road and look at just how much a seemingly small internal issue between two brothers over who should rule one of the great houses has an impact reaching so far across the borders and for decades down the road. This is just. It wasn't until I really did some research and reading into it. I knew there was some important things going on here, but it didn't take that long view until I looked back at over time just how much of this rebellion that actually fought and taken place off scene, off the table, This takes place prior to the opening of the BattleTech 3025 era. So this is actually the groundwork being set up for the player base as we come into BattleTech, as we begin to know BattleTech. This just goes to help reinforce just how rich and deep and varied the history, the backstory for BattleTech is. So when you were a new player and we were all new, introducing ourselves to a new game that was for the most part at that time a tabletop war game, not a role-playing game at all. The fact that we had such a rich history and background and was just astonishing. It was one of the draws to a lot of people to the game world, and it's only been built upon since, even through the hot mess of and the confusion of FAST's transition over to WizKids and FanPro, and just how much WizKids and FanPro are actually two separate entities that were FanPro was playing second fiddle to WizKids and trying to fill in the much needed middle ground for WizKids' advances into a brand new era. And then later, this transition from their command and control to the Catalyst and so on and so forth. So anyway, this is Rick, and this is my thought on Anton's Rebellion. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have your